It just takes a beloved movie and makes it much more boring and much less realistic.
Yeah, I have a clip of it.
Oh, okay, great.
Her being a retard.
Okay.
The movie is really, really bad.
What happens when a studio spends millions, casts big-name stars, and promotes a film for months, only for it to be yanked from theaters like it never existed? That's exactly what just happened with Disney's Snow White remake. And the fallout is messier than anyone expected.
They've been in a full meltdown about this girl for a couple of years now.
Snow White is generally understood to be a very, very white person. And in this case, they decided, nope, no, that doesn't make any sense. So I don't think we're allowed to say that, right? I was referring to the movie as sand beige.
The largest theater chain in America didn't just reduce screenings or quietly pull the plug. AMC removed the film entirely. No second chances, no final push, just gone. But this isn't just about a box office flop. It's about a meltdown so massive, so public, it torched every ounce of goodwill Disney thought it had. What went wrong? Let's break it down one disaster at a time. When AMC announced it was removing Disney's Snow White from all of its theaters, it wasn't just a routine scheduling update. It was a signal flare that something had gone catastrophically wrong. AMC is the biggest theater chain in America. Pulling any film is rare. But pulling a Disney film? That's practically unheard of. This move stunned both industry insiders and casual moviegoers, especially considering how heavily Disney had banked on this project's success.
It is not racist to suggest that a character who is described in the original as skin white as snow, that is literally how the character is described in the original, that's a character description in the same way that, as you mentioned, in Moana,
the live-action remake was supposed to follow the path of previous box office giants like Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, with a built-in fanbase, brand power, and a massive promotional campaign. Instead, theaters were half-empty or entirely deserted. Reports emerged of empty screenings on opening weekend. Parents weren't taking their kids. Casual moviegoers skipped it. And the early reviews? Brutal. AMC executives were reportedly watching the numbers drop in real time, and the financial math was simple. Every day they kept Snow White on screens was a day they were losing money. Theaters need to maximize screen space for profitable titles, especially during peak times. With audiences flat out ignoring this film, AMC had to make a decision that would have been unthinkable even a month earlier: cut their losses and pull the plug. By doing so, AMC broke from the usual unwritten contract between exhibitors and Disney, one built on mutual benefit and decades of box office dominance. It sent a chilling message across Hollywood. Even a Disney film isn't safe if audiences turn against it. What makes this fiasco especially shocking is how one actor, Rachel Zegler, became almost entirely synonymous with the movie's downfall. It wasn't supposed to be this way. When Zegler was cast, she was marketed as a modern, empowered Snow White who would bring fresh energy to a classic role. But instead of rallying fans, she triggered a massive backlash. During interviews and public appearances, Zegler repeatedly emphasized that this Snow White wouldn't be waiting around for a prince or dreaming about true love. Instead, she'd be a leader.
This bizarre fixation with race shifting everything, but only in one direction by Disney, obviously is quite strange.
On paper, that kind of modern revisionism might appeal to some. But in practice, Zegler's delivery came across, according to many viewers, as condescending and dismissive of the original film. Her tone rubbed people the wrong way. Rather than acknowledging the magic of the original story and then explaining how this version offered something new, Zegler leaned hard into critiques of the classic. She often seemed to mock the romantic elements of the 1937 film, suggesting it was outdated or even problematic. To loyal Disney fans, this felt like a betrayal. They didn't want to be told their childhood favorites were relics of a broken era. They wanted to believe that the new Snow White could be something magical, too. Instead, Zegler became the lightning rod for outrage, especially on platforms like Twitter and TikTok, where her quotes circulated endlessly, usually accompanied by captions like, "Who asked for this?" or "She hates Disney fans." Overnight, she wasn't just a rising star. She was a meme, a cautionary tale, and, in the eyes of many, the reason everything fell apart. No one expected Rachel Zegler's live appearance on The View to blow up the way it did, not even Disney. What was supposed to be a routine stop on the press tour quickly spiraled into a career-defining train wreck that changed everything. Disney had handpicked The View for Zegler's appearance because it's typically seen as a friendly, mainstream platform, one where stars can share safe, carefully curated soundbites. But instead of following the PR script, Zegler went rogue. She began speaking on unrelated political topics, made comments that dismissed the core themes of the original Snow White, and, most damaging of all, implied that fans who loved the 1937 version needed to embrace change and move on. The producers scrambled. Off-camera, frantic gestures were caught by audience members. Zegler reportedly ignored prompts to pivot or wrap up her segment. Eventually, she was escorted off the set mid-segment, and the show abruptly cut to commercial. While the full meltdown never aired, enough clips and eyewitness reports leaked to turn it into an internet firestorm. It was all over social media within hours. People weren't even talking about the movie anymore. They were talking about her. Memes, hashtags, TikTok reactions. The meltdown became the central focus of the film's entire promotional cycle. This wasn't just a PR blunder, it was a brand-killing moment. Whatever goodwill Disney had left for the Snow White remake evaporated on that stage. And for AMC, it meant one thing. If people were coming to theaters, it wasn't to see Snow White. They were coming to watch a disaster unfold online instead. Joe Rogan's deep dive into the Snow White catastrophe gave the controversy even more weight and reached a much broader audience than Disney probably anticipated. On his podcast, Rogan described the meltdown as more than just bad press. He called it a full-blown cultural reckoning. In his words, this wasn't about one film failing. It was about a major studio completely misjudging its audience. Rogan pointed out that Disney used to operate like a cultural fortress. No matter the film, the brand alone was enough to guarantee a baseline of success. But this time, even Disney's top-tier marketing, star power, and nostalgia machine couldn't save Snow White. Rogan highlighted how Zegler's public statements clashed with the expectations of longtime Disney fans. Rather than celebrating what made the original story beloved, the film and its lead actress seemed to suggest that the old version was irrelevant, maybe even offensive. It felt like a slap in the face to the people who had grown up with Disney magic. Rogan's comments didn't just reflect what a few people online were saying, they echoed a much broader sentiment. Audiences are tired of being talked down to by the people selling them nostalgia. The Snow White fiasco became a case study in what happens when studios forget that entertainment isn't about preaching, it's about storytelling. And when AMC dropped the film, it confirmed that message loud and clear. You'd think that having a major star like Gal Gadot in your film would be a blessing, but in this case, it barely made a dent. Gadot was cast in a high-profile role and was expected to bring a stabilizing, glamorous presence to the movie. But once the drama around Zegler exploded, Gadot might as well have been invisible. She gave a few promotional interviews and issued generic statements of support for the project, but her voice was completely drowned out. And according to swirling rumors, there might have been tension behind the scenes between Gadot and Zegler, possibly stemming from political disagreements or contrasting approaches to press duties. Some insiders claimed that Zegler had made private remarks about Gadot that weren't exactly flattering, accusations that, though unverified, added to the image of a cast in turmoil. Instead of presenting a united front, it seemed like everyone was operating in damage control mode. Gadot, possibly realizing the ship was sinking, distanced herself from the main PR mess. Her absence from the headlines may have been intentional, but it also left the film without a steadying presence when it needed one most. What should have been a team effort devolved into a solo circus starring Zegler, and not in a good way. And by the time the public realized Gadot was even in the film, most had already decided they weren't watching it. If there's one thing Disney is known for, aside from making movies, it's controlling the narrative. Their PR machine is one of the most well-oiled in the industry. But with Snow White, that machine completely broke down. The plan was to sell a modern fairy tale with a strong female lead, blend old-school nostalgia with progressive messaging, and leverage Disney's marketing might to make it a hit. But instead, Audiences got mixed messages, conflicting interviews, and a studio that looked like it was fighting with its own star. Zegler went off-script repeatedly, posting her own takes on social media that clashed with Disney's polished image. Internally, things were reportedly chaotic. Cast members gave conflicting interviews. Producers were caught off guard. And rumors leaked that even people within Disney's circle were voicing concern. One story even circulated about a producer's own family member criticizing Zegler online. It was chaos. Normally, Disney's PR strategy creates a sense of unity and confidence. With Snow White, the opposite happened. The public saw confusion, division, and an almost desperate attempt to regain control after the View disaster. And in the age of 24/7 content and viral clips, that kind of disarray can destroy a movie's chances before it even opens. This wasn't just a group of trolls being loud on social media. This was a fan rebellion. After the combination of Rachel Zegler's controversial comments, the botched interviews, and the lack of clear messaging from Disney, viewers didn't just criticize the film, they boycotted it. On Twitter, now X, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, you name it, hashtags like #NotMySnowWhite and #BoycottDisney exploded. People weren't just venting. They were actively telling others not to see the movie. And what's wild is, this movement wasn't entirely political. It wasn't just one side of the spectrum getting mad. It was everyone, nostalgia-driven Disney fans, parents who wanted something wholesome for their kids, and even progressive viewers who thought the messaging was clumsy and hollow. To many, it felt like the film disrespected the legacy of the original Snow White while trying to repackage it as something better. That tone alone turned off lifelong fans. Others thought Disney was just trying to score points with modern audiences without understanding them. The film felt like a corporate product trying to lecture its way into relevance, and people weren't buying it. Literally. Families started skipping it for other family-friendly films, and soon, even the general audience, those who had no idea who Rachel Zegler was, started hearing the buzz and staying away. Memes of empty theaters and sarcastic takes like "snow beige" began to trend. For Disney, this kind of grassroots backlash was a nightmare. It meant that no amount of advertising could fix what had become a cultural rejection. The numbers didn't lie. Despite Disney pouring millions into marketing, the box office returns were humiliating. By opening weekend, it was clear that the film wasn't just underperforming, it was flopping hard. And for theater chains like AMC, this was a serious problem. Theater real estate is competitive. Every screen is valuable, especially during blockbuster season. Snow White had originally been booked on the assumption it would perform at least decently. Instead, theaters found themselves with half-empty screenings and barely any ticket sales. Reports started to surface of theaters with fewer than 5 people per screening. AMC executives did the math. At that point, continuing to show the movie meant losing money, a rare situation for any Disney release. Normally, a Disney title is a guaranteed draw, even if the reviews are mixed. That wasn't the case here. The combination of non-stop controversy, public meltdowns, and toxic social media buzz had turned Snow White into something worse than a bad movie. It became a movie people didn't want to be seen watching. Being associated with it was almost embarrassing. Parents didn't want to risk wasting money on something their kids might not enjoy. Casual viewers had too many better options. Theaters had no choice. Snow White wasn't just a flop, it was box office poison. And pulling it early was the only way to stop the bleeding. Disney's model for the past decade has been straightforward. Take beloved classics, give them a live-action facelift, and let nostalgia do the rest. It worked for The Lion King, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and others. But Snow White broke that formula, and in the worst way. The fallout from this film, especially Zegler's public breakdown and Disney's messy response, forced Hollywood to reevaluate what happens when reboots go wrong. For Disney, it meant realizing that just slapping a well-known name on a project doesn't guarantee success anymore. Audiences are more critical now, more aware, and thanks to social media, more empowered to organize resistance. The meltdown on The View wasn't just a PR crisis. It was the symbol of what went wrong with the entire project. Disney thought it was promoting progress and modern storytelling. But what fans saw was arrogance, disrespect for the source material, and a star who seemed to talk at them rather than with them. This one moment derailed months of work and flipped the public's entire perception of the film. Instead of building excitement, every headline turned into a meme. And by the time AMC officially removed Snow White, it didn't feel shocking anymore. It felt like the inevitable conclusion of a studio that had completely lost the plot. The meltdown wasn't just a PR fail. It redefined how Disney will approach legacy remakes moving forward. When a movie fails, it usually disappears quietly. Maybe it flops, maybe it gets dumped on streaming, and maybe it becomes a trivia fact in a few years. Snow White didn't get that luxury. Thanks to the sheer scale of its disaster, it became a cultural symbol. The term meltdown doesn't just refer to Rachel Zegler's moment on The View. It refers to the entire collapse of a multi-million-dollar film in real time, through live interviews, social media backlashes, contradictory press messaging, and a studio's inability to control the narrative. And because AMC pulled the movie outright, that act became a defining visual, the country's biggest theater chain publicly saying, "We're done here." Memes of empty AMC auditoriums, fake Rotten Tomatoes reviews, TikTok videos parodying Zegler's interviews. Snow White wasn't just a bad movie. It became a cultural joke. Late-night hosts made fun of it. Influencers posted reenactments. Fans who once loved Disney began openly mocking it. And, perhaps the worst part? Even people who hadn't seen a single clip from the movie knew the scandal. The meltdown transcended the film. It became a warning to every studio executive. Don't underestimate the audience. Don't insult nostalgia. And if your star goes off script, you better have a real plan, not a corporate damage control blueprint. The legacy of this film won't be its visuals, story, or cast. It'll be the meltdown. The one that took down a remake, humiliated a studio, and reshaped how Hollywood handles beloved properties. And that final image, AMC's announcement that Snow White was being removed, isn't just the end of a bad movie run. It's the moment Disney learned that even giants can fall when they stop listening to the people they're supposed to entertain.